A fateful discovery. The last person Adam Rivers expected to see in a quiet family restaurant was the woman who had vanished from his life 3 years ago, let alone sitting at a table with 3 small children who shared his eyes, his hair, and his face. One look at them, and everything he thought he knew about his past and his future began to crumble. Adam Rivers was not the type of man who ended up in the wrong place. Every minute of his day was scheduled, monitored, and optimized by a team of assistants who knew better than to improvise. But that afternoon, his driver had taken a wrong turn on the highway due to a last-minute traffic diversion. And instead of arriving at a high-profile dinner at a luxury hotel downtown, Adam found himself standing outside a small, unassuming Italian restaurant that looked like it hadn't been updated in at least 2 decades. He was ready to leave, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the flickering sign in the window. Maybe the aroma of garlic bread that wafted through the air. Or maybe, though he would never admit it, the weight of exhaustion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He told the driver to wait and went in alone. The restaurant was warm and loud, a family place with mismatched tablecloths, half-burnt candles, and children's laughter bouncing off the walls. He chose a seat by the window, pulled out his phone, and planned to answer a few emails before heading back out. The atmosphere wasn't his style. It was too lively, too messy. But still, something in him made him pause. He was halfway through composing a message when he heard a sudden burst of laughter behind him. He looked up instinctively, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on a table near the center. That's when he saw her. It took him a second to process. She was older now. A little, but still unmistakably her. The same thick, dark hair, now in a loose braid. The same graceful movements. The way she tilted her head when she listened to someone speak. And then he saw who was around her. 3 small children, all with dark brown hair and surprisingly bright blue eyes. One was attempting to balance a breadstick on his nose. Another was playing with a crayon. The third was talking so fast she struggled to keep up. Adam felt his heart drop. He watched, unable to look away, as one of the boys looked up and laughed. And it was his laugh. His exact laugh. The same one his mother used to point out when he was a boy. The breath caught in his throat, and he leaned forward slightly, squinting, trying to convince himself that this wasn't what it so clearly appeared to be. But it was. He could see it in the shape of their faces, in the outline of their jaws, in their eyes, mirrors of his own. They weren't just children. They were his. The shock was so profound it silenced everything else inside him. All the anger he once felt toward her. All the unanswered questions. The way she had disappeared from his life 3 years ago, without a single explanation. It all came rushing back. But now it was tangled with something far more powerful. Disbelief. And something dangerously close to grief. Scarlet hadn't seen him yet. She was helping one of the boys cut a meatball in half. Her expression was soft and patient, completely oblivious to the storm brewing just a few feet away. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't believe that the woman he had once imagined building a future with was sitting across the room, surrounded by a future that had clearly happened without him. And in that moment, Adam Rivers, a billionaire CEO, untouchable, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Powerlessness. A confrontation. Adam sat frozen, his pulse pounding in his ears, as a million thoughts crashed and crumbled inside his mind. He kept staring at Scarlet and the 3 boys with a kind of stunned attachment, as if his brain hadn't quite caught up to what his eyes already knew. For a man who lived in absolutes, in numbers, control, and certainty, the scene before him broke something at the very foundations of his being. They looked like him, all 3 of them. Same dark hair, same piercing blue eyes, same subtle expressions he recognized in himself when he looked in the mirror. There was no way to deny it. These were not just children. They were his sons. And she had never told him. He watched as Scarlet wiped one boy's mouth with a napkin and gently scolded another for trying to get under the table. She looked tired, but not worn out. There was a quiet strength about her, the kind of strength he remembered, the one that had both attracted and pushed him away in the past. He tried to connect the version of her he saw now with the memory of the woman who had walked out of his life 3 years ago without a word of explanation. She had just disappeared. One day they were laughing on his balcony, sharing takeout, and talking about ridiculous baby names for a future they joked about. The next, she was gone. No note. No goodbye. Just silence. He had looked. He hired private investigators. He pulled strings. He made calls. Her apartment was empty. The phone disconnected. The bank accounts closed. It was as if she had simply vanished. It had broken something in him, something vulnerable, hopeful, human. After that, he buried himself in work. He grew the company. He earned his first $100 million. He bought a penthouse. He built a brand so powerful no one dared to ask about the past. But the truth was, he had never stopped wondering what happened to her, and now he knew. She hadn't just left. She had taken his children with her. His first instinct was to get up and leave, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way one of the boys took her hand, and she instinctively squeezed it. Maybe it was the ease with which she navigated their chaos. Or maybe it was the strange and unfamiliar ache that was spreading in his chest, the weight of lost time. Finally, as if feeling the intensity of his stare, she turned her head and saw him. Their eyes met, and the moment their gazes crossed, the entire room seemed to stop. Her body instantly tensed. Her eyes went wide. For a split second, she looked like someone seeing a ghost. Her lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. He got up slowly. His eyes followed him as he walked toward her table. The children didn't notice at first. They were too busy fighting over crayons. But Scarlet didn't move. She didn't breathe. He stopped a few feet away. Scarlet. His name came out of his mouth like a stone. Heavy. Real. The sound of it made her flinch just a little. Adam, she whispered. Her voice was different. Still soft, but now with layers of exhaustion and something else. Something like guilt. He looked at the children. They were still too distracted to realize what was happening, but Adam couldn't take his eyes off them. He gestured subtly. Them? She nodded. No lies. No hesitation. Yes. The air all but left his body. The truth was right there. Undeniable. I think we should talk, he said, barely keeping his voice steady. Scarlet looked at the children, then at him. Her shoulders straightened, as if she was bracing for impact. Yes, she said in a low voice. We should. A difficult truth, Scarlet walked out first, her movements cautious, careful, as if each step held a different weight now, that her secret was no longer just hers. Adam followed, his mind racing, his thoughts loud and unfiltered in the silence between them. The restaurant door closed behind them, muffling the warmth and laughter of the families inside. Outside, the air felt sharper, heavy, real, in a way that made it hard to breathe. They stopped near the edge of the sidewalk, just out of view of the restaurant windows. Scarlet crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her back straight, her chin tilted slightly up like someone bracing for a fight she knew she couldn't win, but had to endure anyway. Adam, on the other hand, didn't speak right away. He simply looked at her face, her eyes, The same ones he used to memorize when the world felt too complicated. She looked older. Not in a bad way. More grounded. But there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. A sadness. Or maybe just years of survival. He didn't ask the obvious questions. Not yet. The truth was too raw, too exposed. So he started with something softer, though it still burned in his throat. "Why didn't you tell me?" Scarlet blinked, once, slowly. "Because I was terrified," she said. "Of you, of your world, of how fast everything was moving when I found out." He clenched his jaw, trying not to let the anger rise so quickly. "Terrified of what, exactly? That I wouldn't want them?" "No," she said quickly. "I knew you would. I knew you would be there, and you would take responsibility, and you would turn your life upside down if you had to. That's what I was most scared of." It caught him off guard. "So you left because you thought I would care too much?" Scarlet exhaled. "I left because I didn't know how to survive being consumed by you and your life. I knew what would happen. Headlines, cameras, contracts, negotiations. They would grow up under a microscope. And I couldn't do that to them. Or to you. You were on the verge of something huge, Adam. I watched you climb so far so fast, and I didn't want to be the weight that slowed you down." He shook his head slowly, trying to absorb it all. "You were never a weight. You were the only part of my life that didn't feel manufactured, and you didn't even give me a chance to choose." Her expression broke slightly. The corners of her mouth tightened. "I didn't want to be a burden to you. I wanted to protect them. And maybe, yes, maybe I wanted to protect myself too." He paced once. Then he turned back to her, his eyes blazing. "You protected them by keeping them away from their father. I protected them from becoming a story," she snapped, her voice rising. "From being bought and sold by tabloids. From being used as leverage by people who only care about your company. Don't think I haven't thought about what I was doing every single day for the past 3 years." A long silence followed. Neither of them looked away. It was a kind of silence that only came from two people who had once known every detail of each other, and now couldn't recognize the parts that had changed. Finally, Adam's voice softened. "You don't have to justify what you did, Scarlet. Not now. But I need to know one thing." She waited, her shoulders tense. "Do they know who I am?" She swallowed hard. "They know they have a daddy, a good man, someone I wasn't ready to bring into their world until I was sure they were ready too." Adam nodded slowly. There was pain in his eyes, but also something else. Resolve. "Well," he said in a low voice, "I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Scarlet didn't reply, but something shifted in her face. A flicker of disbelief, maybe even hope. She turned slightly, looking through the window at the table where the children were still sitting, completely unaware that the axis of their world had just begun to change. When she looked back at him, her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know how to let you in, Adam." "Then let's figure it out together," he said. And for the first time since she had walked away from him, she didn't run. A new path. The next morning, Adam couldn't focus on anything. His phone buzzed with meeting reminders. Emails piled up unanswered, and his assistant called twice to ask if he would be joining the board call, but he ignored them all. His thoughts were still outside that small restaurant, still standing on the sidewalk across from Scarlet, still caught in the silence that followed the truth. For a man who made decisions in seconds, who negotiated multi-billion-dollar deals before breakfast, he now found himself caught in hesitation, unsure of how to even take the next step. He no longer knew what the rules were. He had children. 3 boys, his sons, and he had missed everything. Their first steps, their first words, their first birthdays. It was all gone, tucked away in years he couldn't get back. The thought hollowed him out in a way that scared him, not because he felt guilt, but because he realized how much he wanted something he had never before imagined. He didn't just want to know them. He wanted to belong to them in a way that had nothing to do with money, or legacy, or name. Early that afternoon, he drove back to his car, parked a block away from Scarlet's modest apartment building. It wasn't in a bad area, but it was clear that she had chosen simplicity, privacy, safety. He hadn't told her he was coming. A part of him knew she might not open the door, but he needed to see them again, even from a distance. When he saw her come out with the boys bundled in light jackets, his breath caught. They were all holding hands, a barely organized chaos, chattering to each other, pointing at birds, at leaves, at the sky. Scarlet saw him immediately. She didn't look surprised. She paused. Then she walked toward him, her step slow and deliberate. The boys followed her like ducklings, two pulling at her arms, and the third one lagging behind, distracted by a stick he had found. "We're going to the park," she said when she reached him. Her voice was neutral, but not cold. "You can walk with us, if you'd like." He nodded, trying to contain the gratitude that welled in his chest. "I'd like that." They walked together in an awkward silence at first. The boys ran ahead, chasing each other. Adam watched them like someone watching magic unfold. Every move they made felt surreal to him. He had missed so much. Finally, one of the boys, the smallest one, fell. Scarlet moved a step forward, but Adam was quicker. He knelt down, gently checking the boy's hands for scrapes. "Hi," Adam said softly, brushing away the dirt. "Are you okay, little guy?" The boy looked at him, his eyes big and bright. "I'm not a little guy," he said with a pout. "I'm Liam." Adam froze. Scarlet smiled faintly from behind. "That's Liam," she confirmed. "Jake is the one in red, and Sam is the one who never listens." Adam felt something move in his chest. "Hi, Liam," he said again, softer now. I'm your daddy." The boy tilted his head. "Really?" He nodded. "Really?" Liam studied him for a long second. Then, without warning, he wrapped his small arms around Adam's neck. It wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. It was just a moment, a child's instinct, and it undid him. Adam stayed crouched long after Liam had run ahead. Scarlet was at his side now, her expression unreadable, but her arms were no longer crossed. She didn't speak, and neither did he. It wasn't necessary. He felt it in the silence between them, something starting again. Back at the apartment, she invited him up, not for a conversation, not for clarification, but because the boys wanted to show him their superhero wall, a messy collage of drawings and stickers and crayon chaos taped to their bedroom wall. He followed her inside, trying to absorb every moment, every detail, their voices, their routines, the way each one hugged her without even thinking about it. As he stood in the middle of their world, with toys scattered at his feet and laughter echoing from the hallway, Adam realized something both terrifying and beautiful. He didn't want to be a visitor in their lives. He wanted to stay, a family rebuilt. Began to show up every day, though never uninvited. He would text Scarlet first, always asking, never assuming. And every time she replied with a simple yes or a short, polite answer, she left the door a little more ajar. The boys didn't question his sudden presence in their lives. Children don't have the same doubts that adults do. They accepted him the same way they accepted everything else in their world, with an open curiosity and a kind of honesty that made Adam feel like he was relearning how to live from scratch. He learned that Liam liked dinosaurs, that Sam could name every planet in the solar system, and that Jake had a quiet side, but came alive when someone truly listened to him. At first, they called him Adam, which hurt more than he let on. He never corrected them. He didn't want to force anything. But one afternoon, after helping Sam build a cardboard spaceship in the living room, Jake sat next to him, leaned in, and said in a low voice, "Are you going to be my daddy now?" The question hit him harder than any ambush in a boardroom. He looked into Jake's serious blue eyes and answered the only way he could. "If you want me to be." Jake nodded and didn't say anything else. But later that night, all three boys started calling him Daddy, without ceremony, without warning. Just a shift, as simple and profound as turning a page. Scarlet watched it all in silence. She still held her distance, not emotionally cold, but hesitant. She had spent years building walls around herself and her children, walls that protected them from a world she once believed could destroy them. Now that world was in her living room, making peanut butter sandwiches and fixing broken toy trucks with duct tape and determination. The next few weeks turned into a quiet transformation that neither of them had expected. Adam began showing up in the boys' lives regularly, not as a force or an interruption, but as something constant. Scarlet, cautious as ever, kept her walls up at first. She didn't offer more than was necessary, and Adam didn't push. He knew she was waiting to see if he would disappear again, if his presence was just another performance, another temporary flash from a man who lived in a world built on control. But this time, he didn't have an escape plan. He showed up on Sundays for park visits. He brought art supplies and joined in finger painting sessions that left his $1,000 shoes covered in glitter and glue. He helped build blanket forts in the living room, and he learned quickly that Sam hated peas. Jake loved dinosaurs, and Liam insisted on being called Captain Lightning at least once a day. They didn't question it. They simply accepted it, as if he had always belonged there, as if they had just been waiting for him to arrive. That acceptance broke him in the quietest, most powerful way. Scarlet watched it all with cautious eyes. She had never seen him like this before. The man she remembered from their past was polished, reserved, a little distant even in his affection. But this version, this man kneeling on the floor, tying shoelaces, making up bedtime stories, staying long after they were asleep just to sit in the silence, was something else entirely. She didn't know what to do with it. Every part of her that had hardened to survive now felt exposed, not because he was demanding anything, but because he wasn't. One night, after the boys were finally asleep, Scarlet walked into the kitchen and found Adam doing the dishes in silence. He hadn't asked, hadn't said a word. He had just rolled up his sleeves and started cleaning. The sight of him there, out of his element, and yet, somehow, perfectly at home, caught her off guard. "You don't have to do that," she said, leaning against the doorframe. He looked over his shoulder and offered her a half smile. "I know, but I want to." She crossed her arms, watching him for a moment. "You were always good at doing what you wanted." He turned off the faucet, drying his hands slowly before facing her. "Not always. I was good at doing what I thought I was supposed to want. There's a difference." She didn't answer right away. Her guard was still up, but something in her chest was softening, no matter how hard she fought. "I don't know how to trust this, any of this." "I know," he said softly, "and I'm not asking you to trust me overnight. Just let me be here. Let me prove it." She looked at the floor. "You missed everything. Their first words, their first steps, their birthdays, their fevers, their tantrums. You missed it all." He nodded. "I know, and I'll never get that time back. But I'm here now, and if you let me, I won't miss anything else." Silence filled the space between them, but it wasn't cold. It was thick with something unsaid, something that was pulsating and alive. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let him in again. But the risk terrified her, because to love him again wouldn't just be her heart on the line. It would be 3 others, too. Adam took a step forward, not too close, not touching her, just enough so she could fully hear him. "I'm not the same man you left, and maybe you're not the same woman, but maybe that's okay." She looked up then, meeting his eyes. There was no performance in them, no ambition, no strategy, just truth. "I need time," she said finally. "You can have all the time," he replied. And with that, she nodded. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was the first real step toward something they both thought was lost. Something fragile, but worth trying for. A new beginning. As the days turned into weeks, a new kind of rhythm began to form. It was uneven, uncertain, but it was real. Adam became a part of their daily lives, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in small, deliberate ways. He started showing up early enough to help the boys get ready for school and staying late enough to read bedtime stories, even when work demanded his attention elsewhere. He didn't try to buy their affection, didn't overwhelm them with gifts or flashy distractions. He simply showed up, again and again, with a quiet consistency, as if each moment was a chance to reclaim a piece of the time he had lost. Scarlet watched it all with a cautious heart. She wanted to believe that the man who folded tiny socks on her sofa and built Lego castles in the living room was the same Adam she had once loved, but different in all the right ways. Still, fear never left her completely. She had spent 3 years doing everything on her own, every tantrum, every doctor's visit, every impossible decision. It had made her strong, but it had also built walls so high she couldn't always tell if they were protecting her or isolating her. One night, as autumn drew near and the air turned cool, Scarlet found herself sitting on the porch steps with a blanket over her shoulders, watching the boys chase fireflies in the fading light. Adam sat beside her, elbows on his knees, his dress shirt sleeves rolled up, quiet and comfortable in the kind of domestic setting that would have once seemed foreign to him. "They talk about you all the time now," she said after a long silence. "Even when you're not here." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "What do they say?" She smiled softly. "Liam says your voice sounds like Batman. Jake thinks you can fix anything. Sam asked me if you know how to fly a plane because, and I quote, 'You're rich and rich people do that stuff.'" Adam laughed, but there was emotion behind it. "They're amazing." "They are," she said. "And they're mine. Every breath, every scar, every inch of them. I didn't do it perfectly, but I did it with everything I had." He sat up, solemn now. "I know, and I never doubted that. Even when I was angry, even when I didn't understand why you left. I knew you were doing what you thought was right." Scarlet's eyes glimmered in the low light. "I still don't know if it was. I just knew I couldn't raise them in your world. Or maybe I didn't know how." Adam sat up straighter, his voice low but firm. "Then let's make a new one. Not mine, not yours. Ours. One where they can grow up without having to unlearn who they are." She looked at him for a long time, her fingers tightening around the edges of her blanket. "I don't want to raise them with someone who might leave when things get hard. I walked away from everything except you," he said. "The one thing I regretted losing was what we had. And now, them, you, this. I'm not walking away. Not this time." It was the most vulnerable she had ever heard him be, and it broke something inside her. That night, after the boys were asleep and the house was quiet, she handed him a folded piece of paper. On it were the boys' birth certificates. His name wasn't on the list. Until now, it hadn't been. "I'm ready for them to know who their real father is," she whispered. "Legally. Completely. Not just in stories." Adam looked at the paper for a long time, overwhelmed by the weight of what it meant. This wasn't just about fatherhood. It was about forgiveness, about trust, about being invited into a space that had once been completely closed to him. He looked up at her. His voice was soft but sure. "Thank you," Scarlet nodded, and for the first time there was no hesitation in her eyes. Now they were building something, not starting over, because what they had before was gone. But what lay ahead was something new, something neither of them had ever imagined they'd get a second chance at. And it was worth every difficult conversation, every silent scar, every quiet night. Quiet. The legal process moved slower than Adam expected, but he didn't complain. Every meeting with the lawyer, every signature, every background check, all felt like steps toward something solid, something that couldn't be taken away from him this time. He sat through each one with a kind of quiet reverence, as if the paper trail was finally catching up to the truth he had come to feel in his bones. He was their father, and not just in memory or biology, but in presence, in choice. In every morning he helped them get dressed, and every night he stayed to read until they fell asleep. Scarlet watched the transformation in silence, still unsure how to label what was happening between them. They weren't a couple again. Not officially. There was no kiss, no romantic declarations. But Adam was at her house almost every day. He knew where the cereal was, which boy needed his blanket warmed in the dryer before bed, and who still woke up with nightmares. He folded laundry while she caught up on emails. He learned to make pancakes with smiley faces, and he once even braided Scarlet's hair in the chaos of the early morning. When one of the boys asked, "Why doesn't Mommy get a turn too?" One night, after a long day, the boys went to bed early, and a rare silence fell over the house. Adam was on the porch again, this time with a notebook open on his lap. Scarlet came out with 2 cups of tea, one of which she handed to him without a word. He took it, surprised by the gesture, and looked at her with a tired but grateful expression. "What's that?" she asked. "Names. Names for the trust I'm creating. Not just for them, for others like them. Children raised by strong mothers who did it all alone." Scarlet didn't reply at first. She sipped her tea and looked out at the quiet street. "I never wanted your money," she said finally, softly. "I know," he said. "That's why I want to give it." She looked at him then, and there was a silence that passed between them, the kind full of meaning, but not yet of resolution. She still didn't know what to do with all of it, with how present he had become, how gentle, how different. She wanted to believe this wasn't temporary, that it wasn't an overcorrection fueled by guilt, but a voice deep inside her still warned her to be careful. "Why are you really here, Adam?" she asked suddenly. "Is it just because of the boys?" He didn't answer right away. He closed the notebook, set it aside, and turned to face her fully. "No," he said. "It started with them. But it's not just them. It's you, too." Scarlet exhaled slowly, her heart pounding in a way that felt both old and unfamiliar. "I don't know if I can go through with losing you again," she admitted. "If I let this go too far, and it falls apart, it won't just hurt me. It'll hurt them, too." "I'm not asking you to jump," he said, "just to walk beside me. And if I can't, then I'll keep walking anyway, with or without the title, or the label, or anything else. I'll be here, because this is where I should have been all along." Her throat tightened. He wasn't trying to win her over, wasn't even trying to persuade her. He was just telling the truth. That night, she didn't ask him to leave, and when he stayed, sleeping on the couch wrapped in one of the boys' superhero blankets, it wasn't because he had to, or because he insisted. It was because, slowly and quietly, he was becoming home. Winter arrived gently that year, bringing early darkness and quiet, frost-covered mornings. The boys were old enough now to notice the change in the air, to get excited about coats and gloves and the promise of snow. Scarlet found herself watching them more than usual, the way they ran to Adam's arms the moment he walked in the door, the way they leaned into him, as if they had always known he would be there. Sometimes, it still took her by surprise, how natural it looked, how simple. But there was nothing simple about what it took to get there. She had built this life, brick by brick, with her own hands, and somehow, without warning, Adam had walked back into it and become part of the foundation. One night, close to the holidays, the house buzzed with energy. The boys helped decorate a small tree Scarlet had bought earlier in the week, each of them arguing over who would hang which ornament. Adam sat on the floor among them, smiling through the chaos, untangling a string of lights that had no intention of cooperating. Scarlet stood in the doorway with a mug in her hands, watching the scene, allowing herself to feel the weight and the warmth of it. Later, after the boys finally fell asleep, and the house settled into that rare kind of quiet that only came after a full, happy day, Adam found her sitting on the edge of the bed she used to sleep in alone. She didn't speak when he came in. She simply looked at him, her eyes soft but cautious, still asking a question he hadn't fully answered. He crossed the room and sat beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her skin, but not close enough to touch. "You don't have to say anything," he said, "but I think I should." She looked at him, waiting. "I didn't come back to fix the past," he said. "I can't. I lost too much time, and I'll never get it back. But I can be, here now, and I want to be. For you, for them, in whatever way you'll let me." No pressure, no deadline, just the truth. Scarlet looked at her hands for a long moment before speaking. "You know, I used to dream of this, of you coming back. But in the dream, I was angry. I yelled. I made you earn it." He smiled softly. "That seems fair enough. But now that you're here," she continued, "all I feel is tired. Tired of holding everything on my own. Tired of being afraid of needing someone." "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "Needing someone doesn't make you weak. It makes you vulnerable." "Then be vulnerable," he said quietly. "With me." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and she saw not the man she had once run from, but the man who had returned and stayed. The man who braided hair with clumsy fingers, who read bedtime stories with too much expression, who kissed scraped knees and tied tiny shoes without expecting applause. The man who had changed, not because she asked him to, but because life had demanded it of him, and he had chosen to grow. She leaned in then, her hand resting softly on his. "I don't want to do this alone anymore," she whispered. "You'll never have to again." They didn't kiss. Not that night. That wasn't what this was about. It was about the way her head rested on his shoulder moments later. The way his hand found hers and didn't let go. The way the silence between them was no longer silence, but peace. The weeks passed. The paperwork was finalized. Adam's name was written, legally and forever, next to theirs. He moved into a small house 2 blocks away, giving Scarlet space, but never too much. They co-parented with ease, with warmth, with laughter. And slowly, the love that had once been buried under years of hurt and distance began to take root again. Real this time, stronger because of everything it had survived. On a quiet Sunday morning, as the snow fell outside and the boys snuggled in between them on the couch, cartoons playing low on the screen, Scarlet looked at Adam and didn't see the man he had been or the mistakes he had made. She saw the man who stayed, the man who showed up, the man who, against all odds and after every storm, had come home.